the world of politics to the world of business. This is Balance of Power with David Westin.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. As we come on air, we are waiting for New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to give what are likely to be his last remarks as governor, as his resignation takes effect at midnight tonight, making Kathy Hochul the state's first female governor. To preview Governor Cuomo's remarks and take us through what is in store for soon-to-be Governor Hochul, we welcome now Bloomberg political contributor Jeanne Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College. So, Jeanne, you and I probably watched Governor Cuomo yesterday on Henri, the storm that came to the coast. I thought that was his swan song because he talked quite a bit yesterday to all of us. Now he's going to talk some more. What do we expect?
Yeah, I mean, he told New York Magazine a few days ago that he's not going anywhere. So I guess he's here to stay. He's just stepping down for now. That was the impression we got. And I think what we're going to hear today is he's going to take something of a victory lap in terms of what he sees as his successes in office. Okay. And we can't deny that he has had successes in office. Everything from raising the minimum wage, which he's very proud of, to his work on infrastructure, gay marriage, gun control, and of course, balancing the budget. Some things he wasn't quite as successful at, and part of the reason he's stepping down is, of course, corruption.
Jeanne, forgive me, I'm going to interrupt you because I now see Governor Cuomo is speaking. Let's join him in progress.
Involving me. But let me say now that when government politicizes allegations and the headlines condemn without facts, you undermine the justice system. And that doesn't serve women, and it doesn't serve men or society. Of course, everyone has a right to come forward, and we applaud their bravery and courage in doing so. But allegations must still be scrutinized and verified, whether made by a woman or a man. That is our basic justice system. I understand that there are moments of intense political pressure and media frenzy that cause a rush to judgment. But that is not right. It's not fair or sustainable. Facts still matter. A firecracker can start a stampede, but at one point everyone looks around and says, why are we running? The truth is ultimately always revealed. The Attorney General's report was designed to be a political firecracker on an explosive topic. And it worked. There was a political and media stampede. But the truth will out in time. Of that, I am confident. Now, there are moments in life that test our character, that ask us, are we the person we believe we are? Or are we the person we try to be at our best? You know me. I am a fighter. And my instinct is to fight this because it is unfair and unjust in my mind. But you also know that I love New York, and I serve you. That is the oath that I took. And in this moment, I believe the right thing is that my service come first. Prolonging this situation could only cause governmental paralysis. And that is just not an option for you and not an option for the state, especially now. There is real work to be done, and it will require government to function at the highest level. What we do now is more important than what we have done as a society in generations. What will New York State be in the future? No one can tell us, because it depends on what we do now. Our actions will determine our future. We must keep people and businesses thriving in this state. Crime must be controlled, and we have to be smart about it. No governor in the nation has passed more progressive measures than I have. But I disagree with some people in my own party who called to defund the police. I believe it is misguided. I believe it is dangerous. Gun violence and crime are savaging inner cities. Look at New York City. The majority of victims are poor, black, and brown. Reforming police must be the goal. Ending discrimination by the police, ending the unnecessary use of force, and then building back trust and respect between the police and the community they serve. That's the real answer. And that is easier said than done. But it's also the truth and the right way forward. Our state's economic competitiveness is vital. Demonizing business is against our collective self-interest. Taking actions that cause businesses to flee the state, taking jobs with them, only weakens our tax base and our ability to do good things for people. We can address income inequality without ending incomes. Taxes can be reduced right away if Washington does what they promised New Yorkers they would do and repeal the so-called SALT tax. That would lower New York's taxes $15 billion per year. That would make a major difference and frankly dwarf all of the other federal aid programs. It should have been done 8 months ago. We're going to have to fight to make it happen, but we must wage that fight. Let's remember what made New York State the Empire State in the first place. New York's historic success was not a process of evolution. It didn't just happen. We weren't born this way. We were born of vision and daring and competence. We built the canals, the roads, the bridges, an education system, and the economy that made us the greatest state in the nation. Somewhere along the way, government lost its competence. And then people lost confidence in government. But today is a different day. We have reason to believe in New York's future based on what we have accomplished together. We've shown potential. We've shown that the New York spirit that reached for the skies, that refused to accept defeat, that challenged possibility, that said no to the status quo, that took on the bureaucracy, that still exists. And we must demand that government continue to perform and achieve and accomplish. We've embarked on the most aggressive green energy plan in the nation. Not talk, action. Hundreds of projects all across the state starting now. New transmission lines for a green grid. We are rebuilding our upstate airports. Buffalo is building back. A new LaGuardia airport, first new airport in the nation in 25 years. A new JFK airport. A new Penn Station to end the hellacious conditions of Penn Station. More affordable housing than ever before. These projects are underway and essential to complete quickly and effectively because they are literally building our future. We cannot go back to the old days when government talked and government debated and government issued a lot of press releases about what they were doing, but they never made a difference in people's lives, and they never improved, and they never built. It's not what we say in life that matters. It's what we do. And the same is true for our elected officials and our government. We have developed over the last decade a new paradigm of government in this state. A government that actually works and actually works for people. It sounds simple, but it's all the difference in the world. We cannot go backwards. We must focus on the immediate threat, which is the Delta variant and COVID. And I'm very concerned about this personally. Please don't forget what we learned together last year. And don't forget what we accomplished. We went from the highest infection rate in the nation to the lowest. We did what no one thought could be done. Why? Because when the rest of the nation put their head in the sand and denied science and played politics, we faced up to the facts. and we made the tough but necessary decisions. And while our infection rate went down, other states have been going up. And now the situation is reversed. New York has one of the lowest infection rates in the nation. And other states are seeing rapid increases. It's sweeping Florida, Texas, Alabama, Arkansas, South Dakota, and more. So now we must realize the reality that the spread will inevitably affect us. And we have to act before it becomes critical. Here's my advice. School opening is approaching. Teachers must be vaccinated for their protection and for our children's protection. Masks must be required in
We have been
high-risk
listening to
areas.
Governor Andrew Cuomo give his farewell address to the state. He started out actually attacking the allegations against him, saying the allegations were not facts, that a firecracker can start a stampede, but he nevertheless would step down despite the fact that he clearly continues to deny that he did anything wrong in those sexual harassment allegations. He has to step down for the good of the state. And then he's ticked off several areas, defunding the police. He says it's a big mistake. He's a progressive. He doesn't support that. Taxes, we need to repeal the SALT limitation. That would reduce our taxes in New York by 15%. And then he went on to COVID and the things that have been accomplished in COVID, suggesting that part of what we need to do is make sure all teachers get vaccinated. And then, of course, he did mention all of the public works that he undertook, including rebuilding some airports and also Penn Station, which is in progress right now. I want to go back to Jeanne Zaino of Iona College, our political contributor. So, Jeanne, thank you so much for listening with us. Let's spend just a minute on Andrew Cuomo and then turn to Kathy Hochul. But on that, it did strike me. He started out, he is not contrite about what happened to him with those women who've accused him.
Yeah, he himself said he is a fighter. That was a defiant Governor Cuomo. I'm not sure I would have advised that, but he came out and he blamed the reason for his resigning on a media frenzy and on a politically motivated Attorney General report. And so he is not going out without a fight. And then, of course, as you said, he is giving advice to his lieutenant governor, who will soon become governor, as to what has to happen next. And he is taking a victory lap for what he says he's accomplished, from infrastructure to fighting the pandemic, which also is, quite stunning because one of the allegations against him has to do with the way he fought the pandemic vis-a-vis the nursing home scandal. So there was a lot there, and he's, still talking about, what he is trying to say in terms of his advice to his successor.
So let's talk about his successor, Kathy Hochul, as you say, now a lieutenant governor, about to be governor as of midnight tonight. From your point of view, what is her number one priority, or what should it be?
I think two things. Number one is the pandemic. As the governor just mentioned, school is starting. She's going to have to make a tough decision on mandating vaccinations, mask wearing, and of course, economic recovery related to the pandemic. The other thing, of course, is corruption in Albany. Despite what the governor is saying, this is our second governor to resign in 15 years. We've had corruption up and down Albany. We are now the most corrupt state in the nation and have been for some time. Governor Cuomo came in promising to fight corruption in Albany. It didn't work out so well. So that's what Kathy Hochul, the second thing she's going to have to focus on after the pandemic and economic recovery is, really cleaning up Albany and bringing a new style to Albany. And by all accounts, she's a woman who's prepared to do it.
Jeanne, thank you so much for spending time with us. That's Jeanne Zaino of Iona College. Now we're going to turn from Albany to Washington, D.C. Speaker Pelosi reconvenes the House of Representatives today to address the infrastructure bill and that $3.5 trillion budget resolution already passed by the Senate. We welcome now a veteran of the House, Donna Shalala, who represented her district from Florida. She earlier served as Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services under President Clinton and as President of the University of Miami. So, Madam Representative, thank you so much. It's always great to have you with us. You know Nancy Pelosi well. She has, at least to those of us on the outside, what looks like a tough job right now, because her caucus is not united about how they're going to deal with these two bills. What advice would you have for her?
Well, her caucus is united. She has 9 members that have gone rogue, that want to challenge her tactics. Her tactics are to keep her caucus together, and she's listened to the members, and she's decided that there's an order in which she will have the votes. And the first vote will be on the rule for the budget resolution. And that is the rule allows you to take the vote on the budget resolution. And she's going to make sure she passes the budget resolution, which will provide for the Biden agenda, which everybody wants in the Democratic Party, before there is a vote on infrastructure. And all of this she wants to have done by October 1st. She has 9 members that disagree with that. They do not represent the centrist caucus. The new Dems, who are almost 100 members, and the progressives are another 100 members, 99% of them are with the speaker. So this is a tactical discussion. They want the vote on infrastructure first. They're holding out for that. She has consensus by, 95% of her caucus, except for these members. And it really is, it's not an ideological discussion, right, because almost all of the centrists are with the speaker on the order in which she wants to have the votes. They understand that their progressive colleagues have to be brought together, that they have to clearly have a consensus on the order in which they take the votes.
So it looks from the outside to us like Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, is essentially staring down those 9, as you said, rogue people who are insisting on taking up the infrastructure first. Are they going to blink? You know how to count votes.
She knows how to count votes. In saying that they're rogue, I don't, they're good friends. They're good people. They just have a different point of view on tactics. And we've always relied on the speaker on tactics. She's brilliant at it because she has to bring people with different points of view together. And at some point, someone's got to blink. And I don't think it's going to be the speaker.
So give us a sense also about how it works up on Capitol Hill. We have this Afghan, I think it's fair to say, crisis going on the sudden U.S. withdrawal. We're still trying to evacuate people up there. Is that going to affect this consideration of the infrastructure bill and the budget resolution?
I don't think so. The Senate is already working on what's going to go inside the budget. Speaker Pelosi is very anxious not to lose any leverage against the Senate. Remember, these initiatives have come out of the Senate. She wants to be and must be part of the discussion on the Biden agenda. She's anxious to get paid family leave and extending the child tax credit and the kind of environmental measures that the whole caucus wants. She wants to make sure her committee chairs who are working now with the Senate have real leverage. And to do that, she has to deliver.
Donna, I want to take advantage of another expertise you have, which as Secretary of HHS. You actually, I think, were largely the author of HIPAA, that statute that protects patient privacy. Could you help us understand how that works with respect to all of us who are vaccinated now, and now when we go to do something, we have to show our vaccination records? Is that consistent with HIPAA, or is it inconsistent with HIPAA?
It actually is consistent with HIPAA. The principle behind HIPAA is that healthcare information ought to be used for healthcare purposes. So in the case of public health, it's perfectly appropriate to ask people whether they've been vaccinated. If I went to a concert in upstate New York a couple of weeks ago and they asked us to show our vaccination cards. So as long as the cards are being used and our vaccination information is being used for healthcare purposes, that is to protect others for public health purposes, it's consistent with HIPAA.
Let me ask you another question. It would be under your jurisdiction if you were still HHS, and that is the question of booster shots, because we had several senior officials of HHS come out and say that's a good idea for people vaccinated. At the same time, a lot of the world has not been vaccinated at all yet, and some people are saying morally we should be vaccinating the rest of the world before we give ourselves another shot. Where do you come out on that?
Well, I think it's important to point out that the United States is the big contributor of vaccines for the rest of the world and will continue to do that. But here's the way I think about it. If you get on an airplane, they tell you what to do if there's some kind of an emergency. The oxygen drops down and they say, put your mask on first and then help the person next to you. I think that's an important message. It's very important that we stay fully vaccinated so we can help the rest of the world. It does us no good to destroy our economy and have large numbers of people who have been vaccinated but start to get sick if we want to help the rest of the world. So I think as long as we keep providing millions and millions of shots, keep that huge commitment, it's fine to make sure our people are fully vaccinated, particularly the most vulnerable. Look, I got my shot in January. According to the rules, I won't be able to get the booster shot until September 20th. I'll be beyond the 8 months that they're talking about. But I think it's important that we all follow the rules. But what we're trying to do is to make sure Americans are safe so that we can help the rest of the world. So I don't buy the argument, particularly since we're providing the vaccines for the rest of the world.
Really appreciate you being with us always, but particularly today. Thank you. That is former Congresswoman Donna Shalala. She's Democrat of Florida. Coming up, Uber and Lyft are our stocks of the hour with a setback to their quest to have drivers declared independent contractors. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Westin. Uber and Lyft shares are fluctuating today after a California state judge struck down a ballot measure that would have declared their drivers independent contractors. Dave Wilson is here with our stocks of the hour. So the market doesn't know quite what to make of this, I guess.
No, it sure doesn't look that way. I mean, Uber and Lyft initially fell when trading began. They've since made back the losses and moved higher. I guess it's people kind of figuring that this is going to be a process. I mean, you know, and the question really becomes, can the companies get through the process and actually make money at the end of it? I mean, that's certainly an issue for Uber. You look at the projections, analysts anticipating that they're going to start seeing earnings, you know, by next year. So, you know, that's what it sort of lies ahead. And the legal issues, well, they kind of get in the way of that for these companies and others that are in the gig economy, you might say. You know, you look at what's happened to employees in the taxi and limousine business, a real competitor to Uber and Lyft. I mean, you've seen them not quite come back. And both those companies, Uber and Lyft, had trouble, you know, recruiting drivers. And you know, these companies, you know, their shares have really been up and down. You have to understand, Lyft is really focused on the ride-hailing business, while Uber is ride-hailing and food delivery, and the latter really saved them to some extent last year when COVID kicked in.
Well, that was really part of my question, because they have a little bit of a divergence in their strategy. As you say, Uber is more diversified with the delivering food and other things as well. Is there any indication which strategy is working better?
Well, I mean, when you look at Uber shares doing better than Lyft's, you have to argue that it's being better received. At the same time, you know, you have this California case, and it's certainly not the only one that companies like Uber are facing when it comes to how to handle their employees. Are they going to be independent contractors as the companies want? And they thought they had that locked in California last year when they passed Proposition 22, which kind of shifted the law. Or are they going to be ultimately employees, as, you know, that the judge's ruling late Friday basically coming out and saying bits of the proposition, well, they weren't constitutional because they, in essence, tied the hands of legislators when it came to deciding what workers could do. Could they bargain? That sort of thing.
Dave, do we have any sense of what it would do to the business model if, in fact, they ultimately lose this, if, in fact, they are not independent contractors or employees?
Well, we do. I mean, we talked to a professor at the University of Pennsylvania who told us that, you know, you could expect, you know, 10% to 20% higher fees from these companies if they have to deal with paying their employees like employees, you know, providing them with the benefits that go along with being employees. And, you know, that's the folks at Wharton School say that. So, you know, they've got something to stand on when it comes to making a projection like that.
Yeah, at the same time, maybe they'll just pass along the price it does. New form of surge pricing.
Absolutely. You know, you're already seeing that to some extent as these issues pop up, higher fees. The companies have to survive somehow and then ultimately become profitable somehow.
Just comes out of our pocket. Okay, thanks so much to Bloomberg's Dave Wilson. Coming up, BioNTech and Pfizer on the rise as the FDA grants full approval to their coronavirus vaccine. We talk with former FDA Commissioner Mark McClellan about what this could mean for U.S. vaccination rates. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Westin. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, now in Singapore, says there will be time to take a look at what caused the chaos surrounding the evacuations in Afghanistan. But for now, getting people out is what matters.
There will be, and should be, a robust analysis of what has happened. But right now, there's no question that our focus has to be on evacuating American citizens, Afghans who worked with us, and vulnerable Afghans, including women and children.
Vice President Harris has faced a barrage of questions on the issue as she continues her visit in Southeast Asia, which is aimed at boosting ties with the region. Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett will try to persuade President Biden against reviving the nuclear deal with Iran. The two leaders are set to meet Thursday in Washington. On Twitter, Bennett said he would present a plan that would curb Iran's nuclear activities and what he called its regional aggression. Jerome Powell's chances for a second term as Fed chair have gained momentum. Bloomberg has learned that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has told the White House she favors keeping Chair Powell. That's a move that would reduce uncertainty about the path for monetary policy in the midst of risks from inflation and the Delta variant of the coronavirus. Powell's current term ends in February. The Food and Drug Administration has fully approved the COVID-19 vaccine made by Pfizer and BioNTech. That action is expected to help bolster the immunization drive amid a surge of infections caused by the Delta variant. The FDA says it has cleared the vaccine for the prevention of COVID-19 in individuals 16 years of age and older. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thank you so much, Mark. Well, picking up on that story of FDA approval of the Pfizer vaccine, we want to see what it will mean for the fight against COVID. Dr. Mark McClellan is the founding director of the Duke Margolis Center for Health Policy at Duke University. He earlier served as FDA commissioner. So, Dr. McClellan, thank you so much for being with us. What is the practical significance of this approval by the FDA for final approval of the vaccine?
David, this is a very important step that I think will have an impact on vaccination in the United States over time. Maybe not a big boost today, but if you look at what FDA did, this was applying all of its usual standards for approving a vaccine when you're not in a public health emergency. So very different from the current circumstance. That means they have longer term follow-up data. That means they've looked at things like how stable the vaccine remains on a shelf in the freezer over time. They've audited all this information. They've gone and done the inspections, gone through thousands and thousands of pages of data on each and every patient that was included in the study, put it all together and put out a comprehensive report. There's not much new here in terms of the actual evidence on safety and effectiveness. We know the vaccine's very effective. We have a very clear idea of the safety profile now, but for anyone who had doubts about that could be addressed by looking at more complete data, it's definitely worth looking at this decision by FDA. It's a big review process that was done very comprehensively.
So, Doctor, I want to draw a line under what you just said, because I must say I thought that maybe this was more of a formality. But in talking to Pfizer, first of all, they have a lot more patients that actually got treated. They're in this. But more important, what you just said, whereas the emergency use authorization was based on a fairly short period of time it's being used. Now we have quite a few months of experience. So there's a lot more data that should give us a lot more reassurance.
That's right. Now, the data that has been coming out over time is something that, because this is so important to Americans and really people around the world, the FDA has been looking very closely as it's come in. So that's why we know about these rare side effects like the inflammation of the heart that's generally very rare, temporary, and resolves. We know that there aren't any long-term side effects that have shown up now in millions of patients who have received the vaccines. And we know that the vaccine is very effective. But what FDA has done is put all that together in a comprehensive review and bundle it up so that people can see all that data in one place, see how it all adds up.
So the thought and perhaps hope is that people will be more reassured. What does it mean for Pfizer? What can they do with this vaccine today that they couldn't do yesterday?
Well, there's several things that can happen. When a product is fully approved, it then is easier for doctors to prescribe it in the way that they think is appropriate for their patient. They don't have to follow the emergency authorization exactly. So there may be some increases in use for people who want to go ahead and get boosters. It's a little complicated because right now the vaccine is all being provided by the federal government under some of the specific terms that the Centers for Disease Control has outlined. But you might see more use among people who just want to get a booster sooner. More important is about 3 in 10 people who haven't been vaccinated yet said in surveys that this finding by the FDA for a full approval would make a difference for them. Now, they may still be hesitant, but there's really very comprehensive information here around safety and effectiveness in millions of people, in pregnant women. There's no, and for other young women, there's no evidence of any impacts on fertility, and a lot of evidence showing just how beneficial the vaccine is. So it should make a difference for them. It will also make a difference for business, schools, maybe entertainment venues, state and local governments that will push ahead with requirements for vaccines in settings where lots of people are coming together and there's a risk of transmission without the vaccine.
So explain this to me, doctor. One might think, well, now they can start selling this and start making money off of it. But as I understand it, Pfizer has a longer-term contract with the U.S. government, and at least for the time being, the U.S. government's still buying a lot of this vaccine that'll make available for free.
That's right. Yeah, Pfizer has a long-term contract that it's still in the process of fulfilling for the U.S. government going forward. And for that matter, for governments really all over the world, David, this is a very popular vaccine, especially in higher income countries that have good storage systems for the ultra cold temperatures that are required for maintaining the virus over time. And it will probably in time lead to more direct purchases as well. But right now, just about all of the purchasing is occurring through government agencies and multinational organizations. We are still in the midst of a major pandemic.
So, Doctor, also bring us up to speed on another aspect, which is booster shots for people who are fully vaccinated, because we heard some senior officials at HHS last week say that it's a good idea. At the same time, as I understand, the CDC wants to take some more look at it. Are we fully approved to have those booster shots?
Well, there is evidence on two fronts that's driving this interest in boosters sooner rather than later. One is the Delta variant, which is so much more contagious and shows some evidence of being able to break through the vaccines, not to cause serious cases very often, but mild cases, and that can make for more spread. Second thing is there is some evidence that the effectiveness of the mRNA vaccines is declining over time. It's a little bit hard to sort out, how much is Delta, how much is time, and that's why the federal government, on the one hand, is waiting for some more data to come in. There's studies being done now, very large ones, of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine booster, so you can get a better handle on this question. On the other hand, looking back, it appears that for higher risk individuals, there may be a need for a booster sooner rather than later. Not for everybody, not for people who didn't get vaccinated till later on in the spring, but that's why they're trying to both move this process forward and wait for some additional data over the next few weeks. So I expect this to get much more clarified as we head into September, ahead of that September 20th, 8-month deadline that the government set.
Doctor, some people have raised a question whether it is ethical for us to be giving a booster shot to people fully vaccinated in this country when we haven't gotten everybody vaccinated around the world. I raised a question with Larry Summers of Harvard last week, and he said, look, we need to do both. We should be able to do both. And is that doable? Can we both give ourselves boosters and make sure the rest of the world gets vaccinated?
It's absolutely doable, David. This year, there'll be more than 5 billion of these high-quality vaccines produced between the mRNA vaccines, J&J, I'm on the J&J board, AstraZeneca, and that's way more than is needed to just vaccinate higher income countries. There is a big inequity right now in terms of who's getting the doses, and we need to ramp up the availability. But we have enough vaccines to do this in the coming months while still providing boosters for Americans. The other challenge, David, is not just providing the doses of the high quality vaccines, but as we've seen in the United States, you have to get those shots out around the country and into the arms of higher risk people who may have questions and hesitancy. So all those issues that we struggled with here this year, those are even bigger challenges in many low and middle income countries that have never done a big vaccination program for adults before. And I think there's not nearly enough attention to the fact that at some point soon, we're going to have more doses than we have the capacity to get shots into arms.
That's such an important point. Thank you very much for making it. That's Dr. Mark McClellan. Coming up, the Taliban warns of consequences if the U.S. extends the deadline for evacuation. We talk with former U.S. Ambassador and State Department official Martin Indyk. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Westin. President Biden said over the weekend that the U.S. may not be able to complete the evacuation from Kabul by the August 31 deadline. And the Taliban warns of, quote, consequences if it doesn't. Martin Indyk served twice as U.S. Ambassador to Israel and as Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs under President Carter. He is the author of the forthcoming book, Master of the Game, Henry Kissinger and the Art of Middle East Diplomacy. So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. Give us your take on what's going on right now, particularly in our apparently delicate negotiations with the Taliban, effectively, to get those Americans and also people who supported us out of the country.
Well, clearly we're walking a tightrope here, and President Biden, I think, is being very careful about what he says about the engagement with the Taliban. We have some leverage on them, but they have a hell of a lot of leverage on us, given that they control the area around the airport and the rest of Kabul. So it's a diplomatic dance at the moment. I think they will probably tolerate some extension as long as they know that the withdrawal is going to continue, and there's no reason for President Biden to change his mind on that. So I do think they'll find a way out. But the Taliban clearly want to register that they don't want this to be open-ended, but neither does Biden. So I think there's a common interest here.
Talk about the leverage that we might have with respect to the Taliban. Is it in significant part financial?
Yes. Again, I wouldn't exaggerate it, but I think that the most important thing is that the Taliban, once they take over government, which is what they're doing at the moment, have to choose between fighting the enemy and feeding the people. Well, the enemy's going away. And so now they're going to have to feed the people. And if they want to feed the people, they're going to need international aid. And all the Afghan government's assets, I mean, billions of dollars are frozen in the United States, probably frozen in other countries as well. And I think that President Biden will concert the activities of other Western nations in withholding recognition until there's some guarantees for what they're worth of the treatment of Afghan women and girls in particular, but also the liberties that have been established under the last 20 years to some assurance that the Taliban is not going to visit a regime of terror again on the people of Afghanistan. I think that it's possible to get some assurances, but I wouldn't rely on them. And the more problems that the Taliban have in exercising control, the more likely they're going to revert to their old form of repression.
Martin, all of our thoughts immediately are of the consequences for these people over there whose very lives are at risk. But there are also ramifications that go beyond the people in Afghanistan. Give us your take about the region. What are the longer-term consequences that might really affect U.S. interests?
Well, in the Middle East region, generally, you haven't heard much of the concerns expressed that you hear from Western capitals. And that's because they've come to terms with the fact that the United States is retrenching from the Middle East, withdrawing not just from Afghanistan, but from Iraq and Syria. And that's been coming a long time. It started with Obama, been carried on by Trump, and now Biden. So they're not surprised by the fact of the ending of American engagement. And they've been making their adjustments. The Arab states have been hedging with Russia and China, the other major external powers in the region, and also with Israel, which they see as a capable regional power that they can work with because they share common interests. And you've seen the warming of relations between Israel and these Arab countries as well. That's all a consequence of U.S. withdrawal. So I think that in the short term, they're not so upset about it. What they're concerned about is the way that the United States is stumbling. And that is emboldening not only the Taliban with its successful surprise, the easy takeover, but it's emboldening like-minded radical Islamists across the region, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. All of them will take heart at the way in which the United States appears to have stumbled in this situation. And the sense of weakness is something that they will try to take advantage of. I think the regimes, our partners and allies in the region, are quite concerned about that knock-on effect.
Martin, you mentioned the Western capitals and concern, maybe even dismay being expressed. We now have Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, calling, as I understand, an emergency G7 meeting tomorrow to address this. What damage do you think we may have done with the leadership in the Western capitals? When we have a candidate who's quite possibly the next Chancellor of Germany basically saying this is the worst moment in NATO's history.
Yeah, I think that this is a short-term effect. The reality is, for security purposes, our European allies are dependent on us. And for all of their concern and criticism, that is not going to change. They need the United States to be an effective superpower. And therefore, I think in the G7 and other discussions, particularly NATO discussions, they're going to be more concerned about how they can help the United States rather than how they can continue to criticize it, because that only advantages our common adversaries, whether it's China or Russia. I don't think the Europeans were going to do what we wanted them to do in terms of, for instance, confronting China before this, and so they're not going to change that approach afterwards. But I do think this is a temporary concern on their part, that the abiding reality of their dependence on the United States for their security is the thing that's going to concentrate their minds over time.
And finally, Martin, what is the message being sent to Beijing and President Xi? I mean, there are those who suggest that might embolden him, particularly when it comes to things like Taiwan, maybe not invading, but crowding it. On the other hand, you and I both read Tom Friedman over the weekend in the New York Times saying, no, that's the worst thing could happen to President Xi, to us pull out of Afghanistan so we're not pinned down over there.
Yeah, I think that's basically right, although the Chinese will certainly clip a coupon on the apparent incompetence of the American response in the short term. I think that they understand very well that this move is in the service of a broader strategy on the part of the Biden administration, which actually was begun again by Obama and Trump, which is to focus on China and focus on the rising power of China and the threat that poses to American interests. And the less entangled we are in the Middle East, the more able we are to focus on China. So I think that overall, they preferred a situation where we were bogged down in the Middle East, and this has been the case for many years now, for decades. We've been preoccupied with the Middle East. And they've been able to take advantage of that to build their power. Now that we are focused on them and less burdened by other distractions, I think that they will feel less comfortable over time.
Will our allies be less likely to support us in putting pressure on China?
look, as I suggested before, they prefer to do business with China than to confront China. They have serious economic interests with China, but they're going to, and they have been balancing with their commitments to the alliance with the United States. So it's going to be complicated for the Europeans. Less complicated for our Asian allies, who feel more threatened by a rising China. I'm talking about Japan, South Korea, Australia. They are more willing to put the interests of the common interests of this Western alliance against China first. But even they have very serious economic relationships with China, which they cannot afford to jeopardize. So it's a complicated dance, but one in which attention from the United States that is untrammeled by the previous commitments to the Middle East makes it easier for us to do this job of dealing with China.
Martin, thank you so very much for being with us. This is Ambassador Martin Indyk, Distinguished Fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations. Coming up later this week, Balance of Power hits the road. I'm going to be live from Detroit this Thursday with GM Chair and CEO Mary Barra. Don't miss this exclusive conversation on the future of electric vehicles and a good deal more. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Westin. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we'll talk to Jay Timmons of the National Association of Manufacturers about its new report on the state of the industry and what the infrastructure bill could mean for it. And we want to give you an early heads up about an exclusive interview this Thursday. I'll sit down with GM CEO and Chair Mary Barra on Thursday. I'll be out in Detroit. We'll talk about whether investors should value the company as a tech stock. This is Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Television and Radio.